Let's talk about something that's invisible to the eye but heavy on the soul: misalignment. You might not realize it at first, but one of the deepest reasons you're struggling within yourself is because you're not living in alignment with your core values. You're saying yes to things you don't believe in. You're showing up in situations that don't sit right in your gut. And every time you ignore that quiet inner voice, every time you go against what feels true for you, you chip away at your own sense of peace. This misalignment is sneaky. It doesn't always show up as a big, dramatic betrayal of your beliefs. It starts small: laughing at something that doesn't feel right, tolerating behavior that goes against your boundaries, choosing a career because it's safe or respected, not because it lights you up. And slowly, over time, you build a life may look fine on the outside but feels hollow on the inside. You walk around carrying this restlessness, this pressure you can't quite name. And the world tells you to hustle more, be more, be more. But more of what? If you don't know what you truly stand for, then more just becomes noise. And here's the thing: we all do this. We all drift. Life throws things at you: expectations, pressure, fear of letting people down. And you start making decisions out of obligation rather than authenticity. You start playing roles. You become who your partner wants you to be, who your parents expected you to be, who society told you what should be. But at some point, the roles stop working. You hit a wall. The motivation dries up. You wake up one day and realize that you're exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, because you've been living someone else's version of your life. You don't just feel the struggle in your mind, you feel it in your body. You feel it in the anxiety that shows up out of nowhere. You feel it in the fatigue that no amount of sleep seems to fix. You feel it in the tension in your chest, that tightness in your throat when you want to speak up but stay silent. That's not weakness. That's your body trying to get your attention. That's your soul knocking, saying, "This isn't right. We weren't meant to live like this." And when you're misaligned, even your victories feel empty. You hit your goals, but there's no fulfillment. You check the boxes, but there's no joy. And you wonder, why am I still not happy? Because success without alignment is just performance. It's a mask. And the more you wear it, the more disconnected you become who you really are. But here's the good news: alignment isn't something you have to earn. It's something you return to. It starts by getting brutally honest with yourself. What matters to you? What do you believe in at your core? What makes you feel alive, and what makes you shrink? And are you willing to start making decisions that reflect that, even if it's uncomfortable? That's the hard part. Alignment takes courage. It means you might have to walk away from things that are familiar but false. It means you might disappoint some people. You might have to change paths, start over, say no when everyone else expects a yes. But if you want peace, if you want to stop feeling like you're at war with yourself, you have to choose integrity over approval. You have to choose authenticity over image. When you start living in alignment, everything changes. Not overnight, not all at once, but the fog starts to clear. You begin to trust yourself more. Your energy comes back. Not the frantic hustle energy, but that calm, grounded strength that comes from knowing you're living in truth. Your relationships deepen because you're no longer pretending. Your goals shift because now they're based on what actually matters to you. And that inner struggle that's been eating at you, it starts to fade. Not because life gets easier, but because you get clearer. You weren't meant to betray yourself in order to belong. You weren't put here to live someone else's life. And you sure as hell weren't born to shrink for the comfort of others. You were meant to live on purpose. And that starts by remembering who you are and having the guts to live like. You want to stop struggling within yourself, then stop abandoning yourself. Let's go deeper now. Another huge reason you're struggling within yourself is because you're carrying around emotional weight you've never dealt with. And I'm not talking about the everyday stress or to-do lists. We all have that. I'm talking about the heavy stuff. The stuff that happened years ago. The pain you've buried so deep you've convinced yourself it doesn't matter anymore. But it does. It's still there, and whether you acknowledge it or not, it's shaping the way you think, the way you feel, the way you show up every single day. You know what I mean? That heartbreak you never truly healed from. That betrayal that still stings when someone gets too close. The rejection that convinced you you're not good enough, not worthy, not lovable. You might not talk about it. You might not even think about it consciously. But it's there, and it doesn't just sit quietly. It leaks out in your reactions, in your doubts, in the walls you put up, in the way you sabotage your own happiness just when things start getting good. See, unresolved pain doesn't disappear. It disguises itself. It becomes perfectionism. It becomes procrastination. It becomes anger, numbness, withdrawal. It becomes a voice in your head that says, don't get too close. Don't trust. Don't try. Don't hope. And the worst part, you start believing that voice. You start living as if that voice is you. But it's not you. It's the wounded version of you. Stuck in a moment that hurt, frozen in an emotional loop that never got closure. And here's the thing. You don't have to have gone through some major trauma to be carrying emotional baggage. It could have been something subtle. A parent who was emotionally unavailable. A time in your life when you felt invisible, a situation where you were shamed for just being yourself. These moments build up, and because no one teaches us how to process emotions in real time, we stuff them down. We tell ourselves, it's fine, I'm over it, but your body keeps the score. Your nervous system remembers, and it will keep trying to get your attention until you listen. If you're struggling in yourself, ask it, what haven't I allowed myself to feel? What pain have I been avoiding? What memories do I still carry that I've never actually faced head on? Because until you go back and deal with that pain, it keeps showing up in your present. You end up fighting battles that have nothing to do with what's happening now and everything to do with the past you haven't made peace with. But listen closely. This isn't about blame. It's not about blaming your parents or your ex or your past. It's about responsibility. Because even if you weren't responsible for the pain, you're responsible for the healing. That's your power. And when you step into that power, when you stop avoiding the hard conversations with yourself and start being radically honest about what still hurts, that's when you start to take your life back. The healing doesn't happen all at once. It's not a straight line. It's messy. Sometimes it hurts more before it gets better, but it's worth it because when you release that emotional weight, when you stop carrying around the past like it's your identity, you free up space. Space for joy, space for clarity, space for growth. You become lighter, not just emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You stop reacting out of old wounds and start responding from a place of truth. And that's when things shift. Your relationships improve because you're no longer expecting others to heal what you haven't healed yourself. Your confidence grows because you stop defining yourself by what broke you. You stop running, numbing, distracting. You start living again, authentically, powerfully. So if you're stuck in this cycle of internal struggle, I want to ask you, what are you still holding on to that's weighting you down? What have you locked away so tightly that you forgot it was even there? Because until you face it, it will continue to control you from the shadows. And when you finally do face it, not with judgment, but with compassion, you'll remember that you were never broken. You were just wounded. And wounds can heal if you let them. You want to stop struggling within yourself, then stop pretending you're not hurting. Let's talk about a conflict almost everyone faces at some point. The war between who you are right now and who you're becoming. You want to grow. You want to evolve. You want to level up in your life, in your relationships, in your purpose. But at the same time, there's this pull back toward what's safe, what's familiar, what you've always known. That internal tug, war between change and comfort, that's one of the biggest reasons you're struggling within yourself. Deep down, you know you're capable of more. You know there's a version of you out there that's more powerful, more fulfilled, more free. You can feel it in your bones. But the moment you start to step toward the next level of yourself, fear kicks in. That voice starts whispering, what if you fail? What if you lose everything? What if people don't like the new you? What if it's too late? And you start to doubt. You start to pull back. You find yourself taking one step forward and two steps back. Not because you don't want change, but because part of you is terrified of what that change will cost. That fear is normal. In fact, it's biological. Your brain is wired to keep you safe. It loves patterns. It loves predictability. It doesn't care if those patterns are painful or unfulfilling. It just wants familiar. So the moment you step outside the comfort zone, your brain throws up warning signs. It tells you to retreat, to stay small, to stay the same. But comfort is a liar. Comfort convinces you to settle. And when you settle for too long, you begin to feel disconnected from yourself. That disconnection, that friction between who you are and who you're pretending to be, that's where the internal struggle is born. And I'm not saying you have to blow up your whole life tomorrow. I'm saying you've got to start being honest about what's no longer serving you. You've got to ask yourself, where am I shrinking just to feel safe? Where am I choosing what's familiar over what's fulfilling? Because here's the truth. Growth always demands sacrifice. You don't get to stay the same and become who you're meant to be. You don't get transformation without discomfort. You've got to let go of the version of you that's rooted in fear, in limitation and survival, so you can step into the version that's driven by truth, purpose, and power. That transition isn't easy. It's not supposed to be. That's why so many people stay stuck in loops, talking about change, dreaming about it, but never doing the real work. Because the moment you start growing, things start to fall away. People who once fit don't. Habits that once numbed the pain don't feel satisfying anymore. Environments that once felt normal now feel toxic. And in that in-between space, where you're no longer you were, but not yet who you're becoming. That's where the internal battle is the loudest. But you've got to know this, that struggle is a sign you're evolving. That tension means you're in motion. It means you're not asleep anymore. You're waking up to your potential, to your worth, to the reality that you were never meant to just you exist. You were meant to grow, to contribute, to live with passion and intention. But that doesn't happen automatically. It takes courage. It takes daily choices to push through resistance, to embrace uncertainty, to trust that what's on the other side of fear is far greater than anything you're leaving behind. And let's be real, there's no perfect time to change. There's no ideal moment when everything feels safe and easy. You'll always have doubts. You'll always have reasons to wait. But life doesn't reward the person who waits for permission. It rewards the one who moves forward anyway, who acts in spite of fear, who chooses growth over comfort. Not once, but over and over again. So if you feel like you're struggling within yourself right now, ask yourself, am I afraid of failing, or am I afraid of outgrowing the life I've settled for? Because sometimes what we call struggle is really just resistance to becoming the person we were always meant to be. You want to stop struggling within yourself. Then stop clinging to comfort and start chasing your growth. Let's be honest. Most people are walking around every day with this invisible weight on their shoulders, and they can't even name it. They just know something feels off. They're tired, they're frustrated, they're unmotivated, and no matter how much they try to push through it, they keep coming back to that same feeling of being stuck. You want to know one of the core reasons for that struggle? It's because you've disconnected from your purpose. You've lost that sense of meaning, that deeper reason behind why you do what you do. And without purpose, everything starts to feel empty. You can be successful on paper and still feel like something's missing. You can have the job, the house, the relationship, the routine, and still wake up with a heaviness in your chest because you're not connected to anything bigger than yourself. And that's when the inner struggle starts to creep in. You begin to ask questions like, why am I doing this? Or, is this all there is? But instead of slowing down and getting quiet enough to hear the answer, most people just keep running. They fill their days with distractions, with business, with noise, and every time they do, they push themselves further away from the very thing their soul is asking for: clarity, direction, purpose. Purpose doesn't mean you have to go out and change the whole world overnight. It means you have to live in a way that aligns with what matters most to you. It's not about being perfect or having it all figured out. It's about waking up and knowing your life has meaning. Not someday, not when things settle down, but now. Because when you have that sense of purpose, it changes how you show up. It changes how you walk into a room, how you handle setbacks, how you treat people, and most importantly, how you treat yourself. And the pain of living without purpose. It cuts deep. It makes everything harder. You start to feel like you're just going through the motions, like life is something you have to survive instead of something you get to live. And over time, that creates resentment. It creates apathy. You start to lower your standards, numb your emotions, avoid the mirror, because it's too hard to face the truth that you're not living in alignment with who you really are. But here's what's important. Your purpose doesn't have to be some giant grand mission. It's not about being famous or having all the answers. It's about impact. It's about contribution. It's about waking up and knowing that your life matters, not just to you, but to someone else. It might be your kids. It might be the people you serve through your work. It might be your art, your voice, your energy. You don't need a massive platform to have purpose. You just need to live with intention. You just need to remember why you started and who you're becoming. And if you don't know what your purpose is yet, that's okay. But you can't keep avoiding the question. You've got to start asking. Start paying attention to what lights you up. What pisses you off, breaks your heart, what gives you energy and what drains it. Because all of that is pointing you towards something real, something that matters, something that was meant for you. But you have to be willing to listen. You have to be willing to be still long enough to hear what your life is trying to tell you. And don't get it twisted. Purpose isn't a one-time thing. It evolves. As you grow, your purpose grows with you. What drove you 10 years ago may not light you up anymore. That doesn't mean you're lost. That means you're evolving. But you've got to stay connected, because when you're disconnected from purpose, you start drifting. And when you drift too long, you wake up one day and don't even recognize your own life. That's not a life. That's survival. You were not born to survive. You were born to live. So if you're feeling that inner struggle, if you're feeling lost or unmotivated, or like you're chasing something that never satisfies, ask yourself, am I connected to something deeper than my next paycheck? Am I living with purpose or just performing for approval? Because when you get reconnected to your purpose, everything else starts to fall into place. Your energy comes back, your focus sharpens, your heart opens, and that struggle inside you, it begins to quiet, because now you're being let, not just pushed. You want to stop struggling within yourself. Then stop living without purpose. Let me tell you something that is harder than most people are willing to admit. You are not just struggling with what's happening in your life, you're struggling with how you talk to yourself about it. The way you speak to yourself in the quiet moments, the way you interpret your own thoughts, your own failures, your own reflection in the mirror. That voice is either fueling your strength or feeding your suffering. And for most people, that voice has become toxic, automatic, and unchecked. That's why you're struggling within yourself, because your inner dialogue has turned into your inner enemy. You see, every single day, you have a conversation going on inside your head. It's constant. And for some of you, that conversation sounds like, I'm not enough. I always screw things up. Nobody really cares. I don't deserve better. What's the point in trying? That voice, it didn't come from none here. It's been shid by past pain, by criticism you heard growing up, by comparisons, by moments when you decided to turn that failure into your identity. And the more you repeated those thoughts, the more you started to believe them. Until eventually, you stopped questioning them. You just accepted them as truth. But here's the truth. Your thoughts are not facts. They are stories. Stories your brain has rehearsed so many times they've become your reality. And if those stories are negative, disempowering, limiting, they become the lens through which you see the entire world. You don't just hear, I'm not good enough. You all feel, act like it. You make choices that reflect it. You push people away because of it. You sabotage opportunities that could change your life because part of you has already decided you don't deserve them. Not because you're not capable, but because that voice told you so. And we all have that voice, even the most successful, most confident people you know. Trust me, they have moments where that inner critic shows up. The difference is they've trained themselves to recognize it and challenge it. They've learned how to separate the voice of fear from the voice of truth. Because when you don't challenge that inner dialogue, it becomes your prison. And suddenly, you're not just fighting circumstances in the outside world. You're at war with your own mind. Think about it. How many times have you talked yourself out of something before anyone else had the chance to? How many moments have you walked away from not because you couldn't do it, but because you convinced yourself you weren't ready, weren't worthy, weren't enough? That's not reality. That's programming. And the good news is, what's been programmed can be rewritten, but you've got to get conscious. You've got to start noticing the pattern. When something goes wrong, do you immediately blame yourself? When you succeed, do you minimize it or downplay it? When someone gives you love, do you question it or push it away? These are clues. They reveal the nature of your self-talk. And when you become aware of that, you reclaim your power. You realize you don't have to keep repeating the same mental script. You can interrupt it, you can rewrite it. You can start to speak to yourself like someone who matters. And this isn't just about thinking positive. This is about creating a relationship with yourself that's built on truth, compassion, and accountability. You've been through enough. You don't need to be your own bully on top of that. You need to become your own advocate, your own. You need to start speaking to yourself in a way that builds you up, not breaks you down. Because when you shift your inner dialogue, everything else shifts with it. Your energy changes, your choices change, your confidence grows. Not because life got easier, but because you stopped tearing yourself apart from the inside. So if you're struggling within yourself, start listening to how you talk to you. Would you speak to your child that way? To your best friend? Then why is it okay to speak to yourself like that? It's not. It never was. And the moment you decide to stop feeding the lies and start planting something real, something empowering, that's when the internal war begins to end. You want to stop struggling within yourself. Then stop speaking to yourself like you're the enemy.